I'm reading from my story in there, which is Where Do the Dead Go When the Living Come to Town? And it's kind of all about Day of the Dead, and what I'm going to read has nothing to do with that. So it has to do with the story, but not with the Day of the Dead. I'd known James for 8 years when he died. He was the first friend I made when I moved to San Francisco from Oklahoma. I had just arrived and was anxious to leave my room at the Tenderloin Y. Each evening, I scoured the bulletin boards and coffee shops in the Mission, the only place where youngsters just out of college could afford housing. One night, at a coffee shop out at 24th and Valencia, I was staring up at the ads that papered the walls next to the bathroom when this guy came up carrying a fistful of flyers. His chin met me right at shoulder level. He was all big brown eyes and a sexy smile. His broad chest and almost pudgy stomach filled his faded black AC/DC t-shirt, which he wore over another long-sleeved white tee. He wore his gray work pants cut off at the shins. He was terribly cute. Hey. I wasn't sure that he was talking to me. Are you looking for a rental? Yeah, I said. I'm living at the Y and it's kind of tough. Come check out my place, he said. Before I could answer, he had grabbed my hand and led me out the door and down the street. He acted like he knew what he was doing. When we rounded the corner, he tossed his roommate flyers in the trash can. That weekend, I moved into the former dining room on the ground floor of a flat on South Van Ness, where James lived with two lesbians, Kiki and Michelle. The two women occupied the bedroom. James lived across the hallway from me in a small room underneath the stairway that was probably not of the flat's original construction. He called his room the Love Machine. It took me 3 or 4 months to get used to the myriad men in their underwear, occasionally nude, that I passed on the way to the toilet or kitchen. I wasn't dating much and found myself torn between thoughts of, I hope he doesn't take the stereo, and fantasies of the exotic acts that must happen behind the door of the Love Machine. Back then, I was waiting tables in the evening. Sometimes James and I found ourselves sharing afternoons off. We'd sit in the living room, smoke pot, and listen to the stereo while watching reruns of sitcoms from the 80s with the TV sound turned all the way down. I was a sucker for the facts of life, but James preferred The Cosby Show. I swear it's like seeing God, James would say, when Denise Huxtable's lips synchronized with Trent Reznor's voice. I will let you down, I would sing, bastardizing 9 Inches Nails in my whiniest Denise voice. I will make you hurt, James would mimic, and then pass the pipe. James and I became best friends living together in that flat on South Van Ness Street. We were there for 3 years until Kiki and Michelle decided to move to Idaho to buy a farmhouse. When the house split up, I was dating my first boyfriend, whom I'd met through Michelle, so I moved to the Castro with him. James took a studio on Guerrero, and then he listened to me cry when living with my boyfriend didn't work out barely 2 months later. He told me over the phone that I could stay with him in his studio while I looked for a new apartment. But your place is so tiny, I said. Where will I sleep? In my bed, James said. And where will you sleep? With you. We don't want you to go into shock or get the two in the bed DTs. Right, I said. We wouldn't want that. That Saturday, we picked up my things. We, packed my things off to a storage unit, and I moved in with James. When it was time for bed, James stripped to his briefs, and I put on my pajamas. I realized in the years of living with him as his housemate, this was the most naked I'd seen him. A small scar snaked just west of his belly button into the waistband of his shorts. You're gonna wear all that? He asked. I get a chest cold if I don't, I said, pulling back the covers. By the way, just how many men have slept in this bed? You'd be surprised how few, James said, sliding between the sheets, which were covered with pictures of cowboys and horses and teepees. Oh, really? I lay on my side and nestled my face into the pillow. Yes, James said, propping himself on his elbow. He was behind me, looking over my shoulder. If they need to sleep, I send them home. I guess I'm an exception because I don't have a home. James laughed. Don't you ever want a steady boyfriend, I asked. Why settle for one when you can have them all, he replied. Besides, who needs a boyfriend when I have you? He kissed me on the cheek and pulled the covers up and went to sleep. He began to snore in my ear. I could feel him behind me there, his furry chest only inches from my shoulder blades. It was almost perfect. But I lay awake, unable to roll over, unable to tell James how I wanted the keys to the love machine. Thank you.